All right. Hello, everyone. Those of you tuning in, we'll be starting in around 4 to 5 minutes. But just in case anyone here is new, this is the third day out of 3 of OS Talk event. This is basically a platform event, conference-esque thing where the goal is to serve as a platform for players all around the community to share their stories and voices and wisdom to all of you guys. So yes, much appreciated to all of you tuning in, and our first talk will be starting in just a couple minutes. So in the meantime, I will let you all know that if you want to support this event, then absolutely best thing you can do is to spread the word to anyone else who you think might be interested in these talks and this event as a whole. But yeah, we will see you all in just a couple minutes. Oh, also, so towards the bottom of the server, and those of you listening on Twitch, we are at discord.gg/ppy. That is the official development server for OSU. And towards the bottom of the server, there is a community meetings channel in which there will very shortly be a text thread where you all can commune and discuss amongst each other, share your thoughts and questions and all that stuff. And then between talks, we will be taking questions from there and elaborating on the topic that had just been brought up from that talk. So yes, please do make good use of that channel. And yeah, we will see you all very, very soon. All right, so our first speaker of the day, this is day 3 of OS Talk event, is Christy2708, who will be talking about their experience with various different switches and tapping techniques and all of what they've learned on their journey to perfecting their tapping technique. So, Chrissy, I will leave you to your talk, and thank you everyone for being here.
All right. Thank you, Digital Hypno, for bringing me to this also talk event. So, as you just mentioned, the speech that I'm going to hold is about my perspective on switches and its direct correlation to tapping techniques. So, I'm going to start this speech with a very controversial take, and it's probably going to make a few people mad, maybe a bit more people mad, and that is that the HyperX alloy core with the HyperX switches should not be called the OSU keyboard, nor is it a good keyboard to be recommended over other options that exist out there, and I am going to explain step by step why that is. Let's begin. So first off, you will be thinking right now, oh, hey there, most top players are using this keyboard, so what's it to you that you bring this controversial point that, that keyboard is not also keyboard, so my keyboard should be the one, right? No. And here is why. There is no such thing as a OSU keyboard because all keyboards are OSU keyboards because you play tapping, like you tap on the keyboard and you aim with a tablet, unless you play mouse on it. That's a whole different topic. But that is generally the case for most people, right? Like you use the keyboard to tap. So by that logic, we should deduce that all keyboards are in fact also keyboards, and there is no reason to recommend one over the other, unless there is a certain category of switches that I would personally recommend if you're having specific problems like key chattering, because that is something that those switches do not have. And those switches are called contactless switches because they do not have a metal contact, right? So the regular switch, like the standard Cherry MX switch, is activated by a sensing mechanism of two metal pieces hitting against each other, and they produce the input signal that the keyboard controller takes and then sends it to the PC. That's how the mechanism works. However, these contactless switches do not have that mechanism. By the way, that mechanism that the standard Cherry switches have, they need a debounce mechanism so that it doesn't chatter, which is what produces the key chattering exactly, the failure in the debounce mechanism. So, but I didn't get to this conclusion, I didn't get to using contactless switches until I've tried a bunch of other switches from various degrees to my likeness. Like some I liked more, some I liked less, and I'm going to say I'm going to list a few of them that I've used throughout the years. So my first the first switches that I used were the Ultima Blues in a Red Dragon Vara. Those were my very first ones. They were kind of okay for a budget-friendly keyboard. Then I went on to Cherry MX Silent Reds in a Corsair Strafe. This was one of my least favorite switches, which is like, it feels like a linear switch, like a Cherry MX Red, but mushier and more scratchy because it has rubber dampeners inside the switch to dampen the noise, which is okay if you want to use it for office use, like it's actually pretty usable, but I wouldn't recommend it for any other purpose than typing. My opinion, of course. Then I also tried Razer oranges, yellows, and greens in a Black Widow, and they were fine. They were just fine. They felt almost like a standard Cherry MX Blue, MX Silver, and a MX Brown. But the oranges felt actually better than the MX Browns. The MX Browns kind of feel like sandpaper. Like it's a cherry. It feels like a Cherry MX Red, but with like sandpaper in it. It's not very tactile. It's slightly tactile, but not really. That's just my opinion. And then from all of those, I also use the HyperX Reds because I wouldn't have said what I said in the beginning if I haven't tried them. And they're basically a Cherry MX Red with slightly less scratchiness. That's all it is. It's a glorified Cherry MX Red. That's my take on it. And then I saw some YouTube videos popping up recently about a Razer keyboard switch that got released, the Razer Huntsman TKL, and those used contactless Razer Optical Reds, the variant 1 version. I'm saying this because there is a version 2 out that is basically feeling like the Cherry Silent Reds, just minus the scratchiness, but it still feels mushy. Tokaku said that in her video when she reviewed the V2 TKL. I use the V1s, the ones that do not have that mushy feeling, and I will explain how I came to use these. But there is another switch that I also used, and this is one that more people are accustomed with because Rupershon, DashGN, Karthi, and a bunch of other people in the community have used it, and that's the Omnipoint Hall effects from the Apex Pro. Those are more like Cherry MX Reds, but they are quite different because one, they don't have metal contacts. They use magnets, which are used to determine the actuation point, which is quite a nice feature to have when you want to play certain finger control heavy maps, but you cannot control physically your fingers. So you make the keyboard do the finger controlling basically for yourself. It's a complicated explanation, but that's basically it. So now that I've listed all the switches that I have used throughout the years, I want to talk a bit about the contactless switches and the mysteriousness regarding them. So there is a lot of misconceptions about them, and I will go through them one by one. But here is the biggest feat that they have, and this is why I would recommend them if you are going to use, if you want to buy something like a Cherry MX Red or something standard like the HyperX switches that they have, like pre-built keyboards, not something like a custom-made one with Telios, Pandas, Zeals. If you want to use those, I cannot really recommend something similar as in an optical switch because those are more niche products that don't really have a counterpoint in a contactless switch. So if you want to use one of those, there is nothing really that I suggest you, and you should probably use those. But if you want to use standard switches like the Cherry or the HyperX ones, here is why I would recommend contact switches over them. Number one, durability. So you probably are aware that there are a number of top players that use the HyperX keyboards that have some pretty big problems with the durability of the switches and their life cycle. For one example, KRZ. So KRZ personally said he went through like 3 HyperX keyboards. In my opinion, that's not a good sign. That's not a good thing. So, and it's not just KRZ. Eternum also has this problem. Asked him personally. I've heard that Emrek has swapped 3 HyperX keyboards out at this point. That's what I've heard. And Wildcat changed his twice. In my opinion, that doesn't seem like a very durable and long-lasting device. And that's why I would say, if you want to go with something standard, please, for the love of God, go for contactless switches, because those do not have the debouncing issues that the regular ones have, because they do not have a debounce mechanism. The sensing works through either magnets, which are Hall effects, and they basically sense the difference in voltages between the magnet and the other magnet that is on the PCB, and that's how they make the mechanism work, and they sense the signal. And then there is also the laser one, which is the more popular one, as labeled as optical, because it is sensed by photoresistors inside the switch that send the signal to the controller on the PCB of the keyboard and then to the PC. And because of this usage, it does not have a debounce mechanism in place, which is in place for most switches, because the metal heads bounce off of each other multiple times when you hit the switch. Like if you press the switch once, that metal contact bounces a few times until it settles down and then sends the input to the PC. That does not occur on the optical switches, because they do not have metal contacts to hit off of each other. It's just a laser that is either blocked, which sends the signal that the keyboard has taken an input, or it's still intact as in not broken, and then the keyboard deduces that you haven't pressed the key. And that's the reason why they're so reliable and durable, because a contact switch does not miss an input unless the PCB of the keyboard itself is broken. I've had that happen. Like my first Huntsman Elite that I got had sensing issues, not just with one key, but with all the keys. Like there were missing inputs because something on the PCB was not working right, and I sent it back for repair. It came back now, and it's fine now. So that has been solved, and this is not an issue just for my keyboard. There are also other keyboards that have had this problem. Like I've had this problem with the Corsair Strafe one as well. So your mileage may vary. Good. Then moving on to the number 3, and this is pretty huge. The contactless switches do not have latency, exactly because of the lack of a debounce mechanism. Because there is no mechanism that tries to deduce, has the switch been activated once or multiple times, and then we have to compute that it was activated just once, and then send the signal to the controller on the keyboard. No, it just takes that one single input and it sends it straight to the controller and then to the PC. That's why they have the lowest latency out of all the switches that are on the market. No other switch is more, is more accurate in regards of the latency as the contactless / optical / whatever you want to call them switches. Going into number 4, the diversity of the contactless switches. This is also another myth that many people do not really come to the conclusion. The contactless switches have diverse options. Like it's not just linears. You also have tactiles and clicky ones. Like for example, you have the Razer Optical Purpose, which are clicky and tactile. Lightstrike Libra Orange, which are clicky and tactile. By the way, FancyLad uses these in his personal playstyle choice. You can ask him about it. And the Gamdias Hermes P2 Optical Brown Switch, which is just a brown switch that is optical. And last but not least, I have 2 more things to say. Number 5, the smoothness of them, because this will matter in the technique part. Because you may or may not know, but the feel of a switch does impact how the technique is developed, like your tapping technique. So these switches are smooth. And what I mean by smooth is if you take your keyboard and you press slightly on it, like ever so slightly down on it, you will feel what I describe as a scratchy feeling. Like that is the feeling of the metal contacts rubbing off of each other while you press the key down. That does not exist because those metal heads that the standard switches use to activate the switch do not exist. And as a result, it is buttery smooth. And it's basically like you would have a permanent lube applied to your standard cherry switches. So I take it as a bonus. I can't really go back to standard switches after I've tried these ones. That's just my take, my point of view. And the last but not least, the price. The price of the optical switches is not more expensive than the standard ones. These are actually either on par or even less. Like I've had encountered a keyboard like the bloody i4Tech bloody keyboards that also Fedsland uses that actually are cheaper than the HyperX keyboard one. So what gives? Is it because not so many people have tried them out? Not so many people can recommend them because it's still kind of a new thing. They only appeared on the market from 2017. But still, like, it's a bit of a mystery why these are not really recommended if you're having problems with chattering. And that's a pretty big problem for most speed players. If you ask them, like ask, for example, Xylize or KSZ, and he will tell you how many switches and keyboards he has gone through so far. So the conclusion to the switch department thing is, if you do not have a specific need, like you want Zelios, or just as I mentioned before, if you do not have that specific need that you want to like feel a specific thing, my best recommendation is to go and try out as many switches as you want, because it's still you who is going to make the decision that you want to play with this switch or not. And last but not least, you should also consider the durability of them, of the switches, because of course you would want them to last, right? All right, and now that I've went and debunked the entire thing about the contact switches, let's move on to the technique part, because this has direct ties to the switches that you will use. So going into technique, I've learned that technique is a numerous. It's not just one thing. It's not just switches. No, it's like three things that I can think of right now. Number one is the switches that you use, which is why I talked about it first. Which is very important because it is one of the main driving forces to you building up the technique. Number two, hand position. You want to have a comfortable hand position. As for example, if you have a slanted hand position, like most people would probably have, like it's sitting at an angle of, let's say, 45 degrees, and you're tapping at that angle, you will most likely have problems in the future with carpal tunnel, RSI, and other issues because of your hand position. And that's not good. You want to improve that, most likely. I, for example, use a wrist rest so that I can keep my hand level with the keycaps. And as such, I use the least amount of stamina needed to tap, which is needed if you tap something like 240 BPM or Nomad 5s for tournaments or DT2s. So there's that. And last but not least, tapping style. This also matters because you do not want to be mashing your keyboard, like slamming your hand against the keyboard and then mashing like nobody's business. No, what you would want to achieve is a light tapping style that uses the least amount of stamina possible but gives you the highest reward. I will explain how you get to that point when you have concluded that you've reached that point. So about the switches, I already talked about. The only thing that I have left to talk about them here is that the building stamina part about using heavier switches like Cherry MX Blacks or, I don't know, something similar of the sort, it's a myth. It's a myth. It literally doesn't work. Because if you use heavier switches and you feel pain in your wrist, unlike Eternal would like to tell you, that is not a good thing. What that means is that you haven't found your switch that you can type lightly with and also be comfortable with. For example, my key switch uses 40 grams of actuation force, 1 millimeter actuation distance, and the total travel distance of 3.5. And despite all of those, that many people will say, oh, but you will type too lightly, oh, you will overstream, oh, you won't have accuracy that good. I would tell you to go to my pinned score on my profile and look at how well I have developed the technique that I've been able to properly and accurately maintain proper accuracy despite the lightness of the switch. So switch lightness is a preference. The people that say that, oh, the switch is too light, those people prefer heavier switches because they didn't attempt to build their technique alongside with the switch. Like, you want to use the switch to your advantage. That's how you improve at stamina and speed. All right. Now, once you have found your favorite switch, you must find your proper hand position, because the proper hand position will determine how well you can maintain that stamina and speed, and for how long you can go on until you start feeling pain. So as I said, I use a wrist rest for my keyboard, like the one that is included with the Huntsman Elite, because I have found out that the best tapping position for me is while having my hand on the wrist rest. If I use anything else, I cannot reach to the point where I can stream 210 and above BPM consistently. I just cannot. Which means that also hand position plays another huge role in building your tapping technique. So you should also focus on what is your most comfortable hand position. Maybe if I use a wrist rest, maybe use another key row, or perhaps move it around like the pro players for CSGO use. You have to find the proper hand position. And then, last but not least, as I've mentioned, the tapping style. Like, you need to find a proper and comfortable tapping style that allows you to feel that you are tapping on, I would describe it as tapping on clouds. It's almost like as if you are tapping on air and you don't feel any pain, any discomfort, nothing. Then you can say that you have reached your peak and you have achieved the proper tapping technique that allows you to go as fast as you want while also not missing out on accuracy. And once you feel that you have reached that point, then you can say, I have found the proper switch that I can play with, and I have found the proper technique to go along with it. Which is why it is important, not just the switches, but the technique as well. Because if you buy switches and say, oh, these switches are so bad, they are trash, and so on and so forth, that just means that you haven't found the proper technique while tapping on them. So that basically sums up how you can determine when you have reached that proper technique and what switches you might prefer. The main point is you need to try out a lot of them. You cannot just take every man's word for granted. Sure, it might work out like it does for some people. Like Eternum, he says he is content with his keyboard. Fine, but that might not be the case for you. And in that case, you might want to give another type of switch a shot. And as I said, my recommendations, despite being so immensely performant, because it's low latency and it doesn't literally die unless something else breaks inside of it, my main takeaway from this is that you should consider very heavily into what switches you use and how you are tapping. And probably you would have guessed that by now if you have reached a point like I did, and you got to where you can understand it and you can talk to other people about it. But there needs to be people like me that tell people, okay, you might want to try this thing out, because otherwise we would just stagnate. I had the saying in mind, but I forgot about it. So yeah, this is basically all I've had to say. Just a little tidbit. There are actually quite a lot of people that do use the contactless switches. It's not just a new thing on the market right now. So if you are more curious about that, and if you want to ask me what kind of a opinion I have on different switches and stuff, I can maybe give you a quick rundown of them, and maybe if they're all right with you. But that's basically it. That's all I had to say on my mind. Sorry for going 1 minute over the allotted time. I'm actually very sorry about that. If there's anything left to add, questions, I'm open for them.
All right, I am back from the dead. I think it's rare to find someone that has such an extensive understanding of different switches, and not only have you experienced many different switches yourself, but you've taken the time to look at other players' switches and really understand the difference between them. And I think the conclusions that you've made can be really, really helpful. to a lot of people, because it's one thing to just hear someone say like, oh, Switch is preference, don't worry about it too much. But I think the information that you were able to provide will definitely help a lot of people. So yes, thank you for your exhaustive understanding and explanation of all different switches, and especially how it relates to your technique. And I think it's important to understand when people say that X switch is not good, that you should take it as a opinion statement rather than necessarily feeling like it is objectively bad, because I like relating keyboard switches to ice cream flavors, where sure, some people will say that a flavor is good or bad, but until you've tried it yourself, you never really know. So
yeah, I mean, the only time when I really recommend something is when people start having issues and they say, "Oh man, I used my third, I've killed my third keyboard this time," and that's the only time when I actually intervene and say, "Hey, maybe you should maybe look at some switches that perform similarly to how that switch you like performs, but have the don't have the drawback of maybe dying out." That's usually when I jump in and say and give my take on it. I don't just go around to people and say something like, "Hey, your switch is trash." It's just that I have the only problem that I have is advertising a keyboard as the OSU keyboard. Like that's what I've started with, right? There is no such thing as an OSU keyboard, because like every keyboard can be an OSU keyboard. Let's be honest. Right. The only difference is in quality control in some cases. That's really the only thing that I have to say about that thing. So, yeah.
A question from Bruce Strats came in that asks, do you think Gatoron clears are a good switch?
So, from my understanding is that they have actually less actuation force needed than what I use right now. So, like, they have 35 grams, if I'm not mistaken. And my take on that is, well, if you can get good with it, like if you can develop a technique that actually allows you to have both finger control and also go super fast with it, like you need to go speedy, like play, I don't know, 230 BPM or higher, I would say it's a decent switch. You can try it out and see if you like it or not. If you think it's too light, maybe you can try something that's a bit more heavier, sure. But in the end, it's a switch. It's basically the conclusion. It's a switch. If you try it out and you can get good with it and you like it, fine. That's good for you. That's all that I have to say regarding that question. Like, sure, the main point is trying things out, not just going with the idea that this keyboard can be good for playing this game. No, try whatever you want out, and if you find something that you like I did, go with it and can get good with it.
All right, another question from someone whose name I cannot pronounce, JAAJKO, who asks, opinion on scissor switches.
So my understanding of scissor switches is that those are switches that taiko players play. So they are very similar to laptop switches, and I can see why people would want to use them. It's a weird thing, because scissor switches are not like regular membrane switches. They cannot be treated as such. So what I like to call the scissor switches are basically the Apple of the membrane switches. They're like the premium versions of the membrane switches, and they have a distinct feeling. Like if you get a keyboard like that with chiclet keycaps and scissor switches in them, it's quite a distinct feeling. So I would say if you're really into scissor switches, I will not sway from them, because they are quite interesting in my opinion. I've tried them out. They're worth a try. If you really like their feeling, why not? You know.
All right, I'll take one more question, again from Bruce Strats, who asks, I haven't heard too many unsponsored opinions on touchpads, which are keypads that use capacitive sensors to emulate key presses. Have you seen any players use these, and are they any good?
Okay, so I did see some people that have used these switches before, air quote switches. These capacitive switches, in my opinion, are not really that good of a choice for a switch, and I will tell you why. So, have you ever tried tapping to the rhythm on pure wood? Like you take your fingers and you try to tap on wood, like so, like you tap to the rhythm as you would tap to the game, but on wood. If you do that for too long, you will start to feel pain, like actual physical pain in your fingertips. In my experience, because I used to do this a lot when I was in high school, and I used to watch people play this game during classes, I would tap to the rhythm myself on the wooden table, and it actually hurts my fingers. So if there's anything to go by, those capacitive switches, from what I've heard, are very much like you just taking your fingers and tapping on wood. So I would really not recommend them unless you really want to experience what it's like tapping on wood, but on actual on an and having your input sensed by the PC. That's my take on it. I would personally not go with them because I don't like the feeling of not having a physical response. Like when you press the switch, it's not just you pressing the switch. You press down on a spring. It's a metal spring that slides up and down, and that creates a slightly tactile feeling. You don't get that with the capacitive switches. Like if you tap on the because it was one particular keypad that I remember that went around and people tried it. I would really not use that. That's just my opinion because I don't like feeling the feeling of pain in my fingertips. Your mileage may vary, though. I'm not saying it's not worth a shot. It's just that I would personally not try it out because of said concerns. That's what I have to say about it.
All right. Thank you for your insights. There's a couple other questions, but for the sake of time, I will have you answer them through text. You can type out your answers in the text thread. But yes, joining. What's up?
I wanted to say that if people want to discuss these kind of things, they are free to join my stream where I actually do discuss these things on a almost daily basis. If you would want to believe it or not, because I do have a lot of things on my mind when it comes to switches, so I can discuss a lot about them. Like I do. I can take the questions. You can ping me in the Discord or over at my Twitch. Like the Twitch handle is the same as my username here on Discord. I'm free to take any and all questions that you have regarding these particular topics. Just pointing it out that I'm free and up for discussions.
All right, awesome. Yes, I think many people would probably take you up on that. So, next speaker coming up is Bruce Strats. If you could raise... Oh, wait, your hand is up already. Okay.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining.
Hello.
Hello.
How's everything going?
Pretty good. Happy Sunday.
Thank you. Hey, I haven't changed that TXT document. Could you get that posted in the community meetings just so that people can read along if they need to?
Oh, do you need me to send it?
I don't know if it's like just not letting me send it or what's going on with that.
Oh, sending files. That's right. I think the server doesn't like you sending. I don't even know if I can send it, but I will try.
If you can't, it's all right. It's
okay. There we go.
It's more of an accessibility feature.
Okay, this one, right?
Yeah, that one.
Okay. So yes, joining us for our next talk is Bruce Strats. This is someone who will be discussing how things like ADHD have affected their abilities to achieve goals, maybe not just in OSU, but in various other aspects of life. So, Bruce, I will leave you to your talk, but before that, if you join the Discord server and look at the text thread, there is a text version of the script for this talk if you guys want to read along for those of you who are not super comfortable listening in English. But yes, with that, Bruce, I will leave you to your talk, and thank you everyone for being here.
Hello, and thank you everyone who's taken time out of their day to listen to this OSU Talk event. Today I'm going to be talking about overcoming adversity in day-to-day life. My talk today will be centered around my experience with ADHD, as that has been one of my biggest hurdles to overcome, not only when I was in school, but also when I transitioned into the professional world. I do want to say that even though this isn't directly connected to my experience with OSU, I do believe that overcoming obstacles in any setting will improve your ability to overcome obstacles in the future, wherever those obstacles may arise. So just to quickly define ADHD for those who may be unfamiliar, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, commonly abbreviated as ADHD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that impairs executive function in people affected. Executive function is a set of mental skills that includes working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. Without getting too far into specifics, ADHD causes issues with attention, working memory, and self-control. Naturally, ADHD is an obstacle in the academic and professional lives of those affected because executive function skills are an important and successful tool um, uh, for success in all aspects of life. I lived with ADHD for about 25 years before being diagnosed, for which I was aware that I had ADHD and just hadn't sought diagnosis yet. Before learning I had ADHD, I never understood why others had such a seemingly easy time focusing on uninteresting tasks. I always assumed that I was just lazy or unmotivated, and this assumption about myself would cause me to perform worse in school and later on in the professional world than I had before I internalized these negative thoughts about myself. As you start to essentialize negative attributes to yourself, you will do things to meet those expectations. It wasn't until I learned to reframe my thoughts about myself that I would learn that I am not a lazy or an unmotivated person. Thinking of these things as a temporary state of being rather than an essential part of myself would help me begin seeing opportunities for improvement. I would learn that it's much easier to focus on things I enjoy, so I took a job in fast food which paid less but was more fun. I would learn that dealing with obstacles is much easier after a good night's sleep, so I started going to bed earlier. Thinking critically about my strengths and weaknesses helped me to minimize unnecessary barriers while I worked to learn skills that would help me in daily life. Learning to see my struggles as temporary barriers to be overcome would make the process of self-improvement much more possible. The kicker is I would achieve all of this improvement well before I ever understood what ADHD is. The symptoms of ADHD are still a daily obstacle to overcome, but having treatment for ADHD today has made the process much easier. Today, I can work a job with many boring tasks and lots of opportunities to get distracted. If I had worked this job before developing the skills I have, I would never have been able to meet the performance standards set by my employer. I would still be much more limited than I currently am, and I had I never reached out for help. So some take some takeaways from this story, and like also how you can apply these for improvement in OSU, um, are that negative traits are a temporary state of being. Um, the second takeaway is you are not the negative views you hold of yourself, and you can improve even if the process of improvement is a difficult one. The third takeaway is that a change in mindset and focusing on your strengths can help you improve in your weaknesses. And the final is it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help when you need it. It's actually a sign of strength. Yeah, that's about it.
Hello, hello. Yes, Bruce, I want to thank you first and foremost for sharing this story. I think, as you mentioned, um, it can commonly be seen as a sign of weakness, but I think, as you mentioned, it's much more a sign of strength that you're able to share the lessons that you've learned throughout this journey of yours. And most importantly, and the point you made that I want to emphasize the most, is that you mentioned how these negative aspects that some people have, they often identify with those things, and that can make it much harder to overcome them in the first place. But as you mentioned, it's very important to not let those identify you, because that can make it seem like something that's permanent or something that you just can't do anything about. When, of course, in reality, as you've mentioned, and as you are a living example of, that is definitely not the case. And especially in your application of this to OSU related things, I think it's important to generally not identify with your weaknesses and not feel that your weaknesses, whatever weaknesses you may have now, are fixed and are just a permanent way of how things are. So, yes, I think um, I'm somewhat curious. So you had an idea of that you had ADHD for around 4 years before you ended up getting diagnosis. So, were there any mental sort of barriers that you felt like you had to overcome in order to go and find diagnosis, or um, was there something else? And of course, if this is a question that's not appropriate to ask or answer here, then you're welcome to not answer. But I think it could be valuable information for anyone listening.
Yeah, so it actually wasn't a mental barrier. I had well, it's kind of a two-part barrier. Number one, healthcare access when you are working in fast food, as I was at the time, is kind of a struggle. Like if you do get insurance through your employer, it's typically really, really poor insurance, and a lot of people just don't get insurance. But it's also I still was struggling at that time with like the internalized view of asking for help is a sign of weakness, and you need to take care of your problems by yourself in order to be an adult, and all of that kind of toxic arrogance that's actually really common in our society.
Yeah, I like how you describe that as toxic, because it seems like such a common way of thinking, but um, as mentioned, I think the best way to understand it as being a sign of strength is that it shows not only that you have this thing that you're trying to work on, but that you're comfortable enough in yourself and in knowing that you have the people around you that can help you or potentially help you, that you're able to bring it up to others and ask for any ways that you think they can help to improve your situation. Especially because I think asking for help implies that you know that there are ways for you to improve, as opposed to having or dealing with certain things and just assuming that there's nothing that can help you. I think um, that is more a sign of weakness than having the situation itself, at least in my perspective. So, um, yes, if any questions are coming in, let's see. You're welcome to check the text thread. Let's see.
Yeah, so I see Alec asked, how have you applied that conclusion to your journey with Osu, how you understand it? So, essentially, there are a few ways. The first one is whenever I was new, like obviously, whenever you're brand new to the game, you're learning everything and you're improving at a very rapid pace. But once I hit that first like plateau where like automatic improvement wasn't a thing anymore, and I was going to actually need to put in time. One second, please. Sorry, I gotta add. allergies, so I had to clear my throat. But whenever I hit that first plateau and I noticed I wasn't improving, I saw myself starting to internalize, oh, I'm a bad player and I'm just not like being good at Osu is not a thing that I can do. It's like, and I realized like this isn't an essential part of who I am. It's just a descriptor of my skill level right now. Right? So I'm not good at Osu, but I'm also not bad at Osu because being bad is a essentialization. Like saying I'm bad at Osu is a essentialization, whereas saying I am not good at Osu yet is a descriptor of my current ability. And another way is I've looked and researched for resources to kind of help maintain a healthy mindset around the game and help to like find different things that I can do to help myself improve. I see that you also asked, do I also find myself tabbing in and out constantly during the play session, like between each play? Um, it's not super common. Sometimes I'll have just like a podcast playing in the background. Sometimes I'll be in a Discord call, just listening to people talk and argue or whatever. And I find that having that to actively like, kind of intentionally ignore helps keep me from getting distracted. It's weird how that works. I don't understand it myself, but it does. Having like that background white noise while I'm focusing on something does help me actually like focus in and help from preventing lose focus.
Yeah, I think more than anything, I appreciate how much this talk has emphasized describing your current abilities as a statement of identity, as I think that's one of the most common, it's a very sneaky way for your brain to trick you into feeling like you can't improve at whatever it is that you might want to be improving at. So,
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism, right? We all have a place that we want to be, and the fact that we're not where we want to be right now is uncomfortable. So we try to find reasons to explain or excuse why we're not where we want to be. It's which doing so is fine and having coping mechanisms is fine. What's unhealthy is whenever those coping mechanisms are actually detrimental to personal improvement, right? So like the reason that this is not a good coping mechanism for explaining why you're not where you want to be is because it actually limits growth because it makes you feel demotivated from putting in the time to actually that's actually required to improve yourself. A better that's why I provide the alternative explainer of this is just my skill level now because that is also a coping mechanism. It's also an explainer for why we're not where we want to be, but it's a more accurate one and it's also gives yourself the room to put in the work to improve.
yeah, you also mentioned an alternative to identifying yourself with your weakness as instead of saying I'm bad, saying I'm not good yet. And
Yeah.
I think it does two things. One, it sort of frames it more around your end desired result, which is obviously in this situation to be good. But I think the word yet there is the most important one because it implies that there's some growth that can be had. And I think that just that like very small change in thinking can have a really big impact on the way that you view your own abilities and your ability to improve.
Korean. I'm sorry. ADHD brain going. Korean. That's actually almost exactly what this is. This is the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset. But this doesn't just apply to skills and stuff. This actually can apply to much larger aspects in life. Having a growth mindset is very, very beneficial in a lot of aspects of life because you don't like when you have a growth mindset, it's less natural to fall into the the cope of I am a like for example, let's say you cheat on a test. I am a cheater. Instead of falling into that, you're like, "Oh, I didn't study for the test. I'll do better next time." You know? It's more natural to find the more accurate explanation and see a path forward to improve.
The especially tricky thing about when you identify yourself around one negative thing that you've done is that when you identify with something, you're more willing to take other actions that are qualities of that identity. So, for example, you're a very good student, and then one day something happens and you feel the need to cheat on an exam. And from that point on, if you identify yourself as a cheater, then you're much more likely to do actions or behaviors that classify it as something that a cheater would do because you're now identifying as that. And so instead of taking it as a one time occurrence or just not something that defines you, it's tempting to then identify with that action and then do more things that would classify yourself as that action. So, yeah, tricky things when it comes to identity. I think identity, to some extent, can be a good way to own the things that you've done in the past that you are not completely proud of. But as long as you're doing it with that perspective where I this these actions may have defined me in the past, but you have to do it from the perspective of being willing to make changes to change that identity about yourself. But yes, definitely agreed as well that Korean in the text thread mentioned that this sounds very similar to fixed versus growth mindset. And yeah, Bruce, you did already mention that as well, but definitely it's not a popular mindset for nothing. So, or sort of mindset, like type of mindset. I think it's one of the most powerful versions of mindset to understand is fixed versus growth. So, yes. So before the next talk, I will take a quick water break, and our next talk is starting in around 10 minutes. So, yes, look forward to that, everyone. Bruce, you're welcome to stay here. If people keep dropping questions, you're welcome to keep giving your insight and wisdom. But yes, to everyone else, we will be starting our next talk in around 10 minutes from Tuna Sliders. So look forward to that. But yes, I will see you all very shortly.
Right. I don't know how to pronounce your place. I'm gonna your name. I'm gonna call you B because that's the part that stands out to me. But someone asked, does getting exhausted have ties to having ADHD? I find myself often getting tired when I'm doing things that are not interesting or stimulating enough, which hinders my ability to focus. So, I do want to start off by saying, I am not a healthcare provider. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. If you think that you may have ADHD, I would encourage you to speak to a mental health provider because they are, yeah, like Hypno said, hashtag not medical advice. Um, it can, but it can like it's because like focus and mental alertness being the opposite of tiredness, are actually like very, very like intrinsically linked. Um, uh, Losing focus whenever you are tired, or getting tired when you are losing focus, um, it it can't really be a like it shouldn't be seen as a symptom of ADHD or not. Only because like they are intrinsically, like if you're tired, you're going to be losing focus more, and therefore whenever you're losing focus more. Oh, okay. I know, but do you yeah, whenever I do get tired whenever I'm doing things that are boring and or unstimulating. Like when I'm at work, for example. Like I'm a janitor. Just to be clear, like I'm an overnight janitor, and it's a very boring job. And because it's a very boring job, I get very tired, even though I got like 9 to 10 hours of sleep the day before I worked. I do still get tired. And I've tried varying the amounts of sleep, but yeah, that is an experience that I do identify with. Yes, but it shouldn't be seen so much as a symptom of ADHD, because I've heard like people without ADHD describe that experience. It's a very common experience. Um, if you do think that you may have ADHD, I do encourage you to do some research into it. Uh, hear like people with ADHD share their stories, because they can describe what having ADHD feels like. And if you from them hear, okay, maybe I do have ADHD, then you can go talk to a doctor about, um, uh, hey, I've been having these problems. Uh, I've been having these problems. I think it could possibly be this. Um, what else could it be? And you can have a conversation with a doctor. That's really the best place to talk if you think you may or may not have ADHD.
All right, last question that we'll take for Bruce, which is from Wala Voce, who asks, if I recall correctly, you said something about listening to people talk in order to focus. So I was thinking, do you also listen to music? And if so, what kind? So I assume when you ask this question, you mean listening to music outside of OSU to help you focus. But yes, that is the question.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted the question too. That is absolutely a thing I do in like every aspect of life. Whenever I'm not playing Osu, I am almost constantly listening to music. My favorite types of music are like a lot of the music you find in Osu, a lot of like J-pop, metal, in addition to that, I also listen to a lot of hip hop, R&B. Um, I listen to like a wide variety of music, so just basically whatever I'm feeling like that night. Whatever like I enjoy listening to the most is what helps me focus the most. As long as it's not like superly like overly loud, and like black metal might not be a good idea if I'm like doing something where I need to be able to hear what's going on.
All right. Thank you again, Bruce, for your wonderful insights. I think this is definitely a talk that a lot of people can find value out of. But I may have to banish you to the audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks for joining. All right, Tuna, if you could raise your hand and I will get you up here. Hello,
Hello.
hello. Hello, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Yo.
Yo,
I'm I'm really excited to be here. So I
yeah,
never knew that this would happen, but hey,
yeah, here we are. Yeah,
here we are.
I think a lot of people are excited for this as well. So, yes, it is everyone's credit goes to everyone for making this possible. But yes, joining us for the next talk is Tuna Sliders, or just Tuna, who is canonically.
Titanic tuna.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Titanic tuna is usually the name that I go by.
Oh, okay, I see. All right. Yes, but here in Osu, you are canonically an Osu slider. So
Yes.
yes, Tuna will be discussing the various mindset shifts and improvements that have come from their experience through Osu and how that has affected or improved their life even outside of OSU. So yes, Tuna, I will leave you to your talk, and thank you everyone for being here.
Hello guys. I'm going to be talking about how OSU has affected me and how I used some of the valuable informations that I've heard. I found out about OSU from a friend when I showed him this soundtrack from a game called V. Well, it's VVVVV or something. And it's that old, it's like a retro looking game, but the music was really good. I showed it to him and he was like, "Oh my god, that's I heard that from Osu." And I'm like, What is that game?" And he showed me this game and I was really intrigued. I was confused at first. I was like, "What is going on screen? This is insane." And they just it blew my mind and I really wanted to try the game. So I tried it. It was October 25th, the 25th of October. And oh my god, I could not stop playing this game. Uh and this was right before quarantine. So I got really addicted really quickly. So I have autism, like high functioning autism. So it's it's really hard to get out of something usually. You'll have like your special interest. Um for a while it was Minecraft, some other things like science was a big one. But yeah, that sort of thing, it's it's really easy for me to get addicted to certain things. It's hard on self-control, whatever. But during quarantine, it was really hard. I basically turned to Osu. I was very um I went to I went to quarantine later, and at that point my parents found out that I was playing Osu like a lot, and that really scared me because they're very strict sometimes, but I'd understand their strictness. I'll get to that later. But um that's when Osu became a safe place where I didn't have to think about all my problems in school. I was doing not so well in school. And I also, I think 2021, yeah. I went to a new school. I transferred to a new school and it was online learning. So then that really hurt me a lot. So later on, I would not stop playing Osu. I really just cared about ranks, and there was no improvement at all from that. Yeah, sure, I got like 5-star, 6-star passes, but my accuracy was terrible. I did not learn anything from just farming ranks, and that's all I cared about. But, you know, later on, when the school year was over, um, my parents, they sat me down for a talk. They were like, "Okay, listen, this game has to go. It's not doing any good for you." And my mom, she said something that kind of became the turning point for me. Um, she said something. Um, she said, "Osu is taking you, and you're not yourself." It's like I was getting in too deep. So that sort of shifted my focus. My turning point, I became really conscious about my bad grades and I changed them. But, I didn't change them because just because my parents wanted me to. I actually wanted to change them myself. I was the driving force in my change. It was super hard. It was really hard, but I knew that I could do it because there were a lot of people on my side. And, never not ask for help. You should always ask for help because even if you think you don't need it, it's a very good tool for you and your friends maybe. But anyway, I I banned myself around where the addiction was getting really bad, and I didn't care about ranks. I learned a lot about your expectations and how they're different from your goals and how to just overcome what people say about you. And that's really hard. It's hard not to listen to other people's opinions about you, especially when it's harder for you in life to talk and to socialize, but that's okay because I slowly got into improving myself. I That's what you're supposed to do. I learned from Osu that you're supposed to take it slow. You can't just say, "Okay, I'm gonna set a top play on this map," without like any prior knowledge or anything. You you have really high expectations in the game in a lot of things like streaming, playing a new game, trying to get new skills, and that's really it's it kind of hinders your growth in that game. So, what I want to tell people is that you really want you really want to pick yourself up slowly. You never want to you never want other people to push you. You want yourself to push yourself. So like if you want to get good grades again, you're going to have to slowly raise them. Uh Enjoy what you're doing, and how I made my grades more interesting was actually seeing them as my OSU top plays. I know that sounds really stupid, but if you uh apply subjects from things you like, it's going to make things more enjoyable for you. So I saw my grades as OSU top plays, and now in this year I'm almost straight A's. It's very close, but I've come really far, and I just wanted to say that a lot of people can do it if they have the right mindset, um if you know that you can do it. I know it's silly. Believe in yourself is a huge thing, but it's true. You're not you're gonna you're gonna hurt your mindset even more if you keep constantly beating yourself down. So you're gonna stay in that bad mindset. So um enjoy yourself. Know that you are working on yourself on your own terms and pace, and that will bring you the best improvement and enjoyment. So people are here to help. Just don't don't listen to them fully because you're your own person. You should know what's best for you. Of course, this talk isn't it's not for everyone, but I just wanted to help some people. And life is just about enjoying yourself. A lot of things in life don't necessarily matter as much as we kind of bring it up to speed. Like, uh, for example, what people think of you, um, just a lot of things. There are a lot of things that we can just enjoy ourselves, and not have other people ruin them for us. And now I during my band too, I was working on a lot of improvement, and that actually made me much happier with how I played. Um, just a lot of things like that helped me lessen how much I played. I saw it as almost a reward for doing well. And a few months ago, 2 months ago or something, I started streaming. Almost instantly got affiliates there. I'm really happy knowing that I'm making other people happy because I'm just streaming, and really I'm just enjoying myself, and it's becoming a very productive process for me to stream my games and just have fun. And yeah, that's just your life. And your parents, they're really just here to help you. They may be really scary at first, but you have to take up that much courage. You have to be really courageous and say something. You have to just say it to them. If you have a hard time, just say them. Just say that to them, and they'll help you, I'm sure. And if not, just talk to your friends. Reach out to your friends. Reach out to people you think might be struggling, and it will help a lot. And I don't know, I'm just really happy now. Just seeing my past self was terrible. It was a terrible time, but I'm happy now because of this wonderful community and my parents and my friends, and like I couldn't I couldn't have done this without all of you guys. So, thank you.
Oh, I'm somewhat speechless. Well, first of all, I think thank you for sharing such a personal story with everyone. I think the most valuable talks that we can get out of an event like this are ones that might be able to really resonate with a few people, especially who may be struggling with their own situations. But I think the way that you were able to take the things that you have been enjoying and really having fun with and applying the same principles of enjoyment to other aspects of your life that you would like to improve at, especially how you mentioned you're able to take the principles of improvement in OSU, where you have to take things slowly and know you have to know your fight, know your battle, and understand that things are possible, although just because they don't happen instantly doesn't mean that they won't happen at all. And
Yeah.
the way that you're able to almost gamify other aspects of your life, especially school, I think that's something
Yeah.
that can actually be practical advice for a lot of people, even if they don't have quite the same situation as you. But yeah, so I'm curious. So you mentioned at some point that you banned yourself on OSU for in order to sort of get a break from the game. So
Yeah.
do you, looking back, do you feel like that was the, or if you had to do things again, do you think you would have banned yourself in the same way, or um
Uh,
yeah.
well, okay. This is very weird to say, but um there was an instance of someone uh bullying me, so I wanted to step away from the game. And it was a bad decision because um well, I don't know. I felt like at the same time it felt like it was a new like a new leaf, like what is that?
Yeah, no, that you said it right. That's the
Turning the new leaf.
right.
Yeah. I feel like it was a new start, but also I did regret it because that's not how you do things. You can't. It's basically when you're. I feel like that represents when people run away from their problems. Because you're kind of just shutting a lot of things out of your life when you could be improving. So if I had Osu, if I had the rings still, I feel like I could have changed a lot of things. Maybe uh become more resilient to seeing the rank go down because I hated that. When I was super addicted to seeing my rank go up, one day of it being down was like I hated that. I don't know why, but you know, being being so obsessed with something it really makes you do some stupid stuff. And you know, streaming really made it streaming was big for me. I always struggled with socializing, kind of, everyone knew me, but I didn't know anyone. It was kind of like a one-way relationship with every single person. It was a strange feeling, almost like no one really cared about what I was going to say. But then I started streaming, I started having fun, and it really gave me enough courage to put myself out there. And as an artist as well, um that's an important thing. I've always liked social media, but I don't think I've really pushed myself this far with it. At the same time, being really doing really well in school as well. It's really hard to focus on many things at once, and I'm proud of myself for that. And whenever someone does something that may feel small, feel proud about it. You did it. You came so far. Like, you got so far uh doing that. And I think that's really nice.
I think one thing that you mentioned in your talk that I really want to emphasize is how you mentioned that despite the people around you that wanted you to maybe take a turn for the better or change your grades and all that stuff, but you mentioned that you yourself had to be and were the driving force of that change. And
Yeah.
I think that is important advice. I think not only for people who feel like they need to change or feel pressured to change, but also to everyone else who knows someone who um, they are trying to give advice to. And um, I think it's important to know that l- true long lasting change will come from really sort of wanting it yourself or having the drive within you to make those changes. So, um, yeah, I think that that's an especially good point that you brought up. So, yes, there are
Yeah.
a couple questions that came in.
Oh,
One,
sure.
yes, or did you have anything else that you wanted to mention before I move on to
Oh,
questions?
I think I can go with questions, and if I have something in my brain, I can say it.
Okay,
No.
sounds good. All right, so Bruce Strats asks, do you have any advice for others on how to tell when a hyperfixation becomes an unhealthy obsession?
Okay, so there's again a fine line around this. So I found myself almost like talking in OSU terms to other people, and it's like, bro, what is this kid talking about? She's like absolutely insane. What? Um, but I feel like hyperfixations are really good for someone because they're almost like your safe place. That's a safe place for a lot of people, especially with a neurodivergent person. So I feel like just liking what you do, but not making it your whole personality. I feel like I made it my whole personality. That's super different. It feels um like Osu is your best friend, which is like really over the top. But if you like a thing, I feel like you shouldn't hide what you like because you're kind of hyper fixated on it. I don't think you should hide it, but I feel like you should monitor it, especially with like a game. If you're like really into a game, you should be really careful with it. And um there's stuff with like time management in general. Everything is good. Every single thing that you do is good for you as long as you do it in moderation and it doesn't actually get in the way of your life, like your actual life. So that's really important. And it's hard. It's super hard to see that for a lot of people. So I feel like turning to friends maybe, just asking them, "Hey, am I too into this thing? Maybe I can change." But that's you. Your own your own self has to notice that there's something bad happening or like it's way too much whatever you're doing. So, yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you mention taking other people's perspectives, because from your own perspective, it's sometimes even impossible to tell if something has really become a problem. So yeah, and just to add to that, because I think the way you described it is really good. But if I could add something, at least more specific to Bruce's question about obsession slash
Oh,
addiction,
yeah.
I just think a really, I guess, healthy way to understand obsession slash
Mhm.
addiction is that addiction is a progressive narrowing of the things that bring you joy and pleasure. So
Oh
I
my
think,
god. I have something to say about that.
oh yeah, sure.
When I played Osu, I actually became less like I had less of an enjoyment from it, but I felt like I had to play it. And that's addiction, I believe. That's addiction. It's like you can't live without it almost. And you know, ranks and PP are like huge things as well. Like uh it's like you against so many other people and you just want to be the best sometimes. And that's competitive playing for you. But, you know, I I just I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good way to describe addiction as well. But yeah, I think recognizing, and this is something you mentioned as well, but recognizing something within yourself is the first step to changing it if you feel like it's something that should be changed. But um, yes, very well said and much appreciated to all the insight that you were able to give. I do have one last question. So, do you have any advice for other people who may be struggling with something related to playing Osu and they feel like banning themselves is the only way out for them? Do you have any advice to those people?
Okay, wait, say that again?
So,
So
yeah, do you have advice for people who are struggling with something related to Osu and they feel like banning themselves is the only way out for them?
so this is you know, I was like super depressed and whatever. Trigger warning, it's almost like banning yourself is almost like feeling that you don't want to live anymore. It's a strange thing to say, but it kind of paints a picture for how important not banning yourself can be, because um if you live with whatever is on your mind, so like if you kind of battle those sorts of thoughts, or and get out of it by yourself, that's going to be so much, it's going to strengthen you even more. So if you were to ban yourself on Osu, I feel like not doing it at all is the best option. I feel just talking about that to your friends, just saying, okay, I want to ban myself, or I'm gonna use hacks, to your friends, maybe like, actually, I did that. But they didn't stop me, which is weird, but they weren't the right people. So I I don't know. I feel like this is sort of a hard question to answer because I banned myself, but it's not the way out. It's not the best option because you worked so hard on this game, and then your feelings, if they're taking over, you have to step back and just think about what you're doing. What what am I doing, and am I sure I want to take this route? Should I be doing this? You just have to think really, really carefully about what you're about to do, and that's also like for life as well. Think before you speak. Yeah, there's like think before you speak. Um, Also with your actions, you just have to think. Your feelings, your feelings matter, but when it comes to actions, when it comes to actions that are going to affect you, stop and think for a while. I feel like that's a good lesson.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I think talking to others is really important. I think a lot of people, especially in those situations, feel a lot more alone than they really are. So, of course, easier said than done,
Exactly.
but finding the courage to reach out to even one person and talking about it. So, yes, but again, thank you, Tuna, for sharing your wonderful insights. I think that's something that a lot of people can find value from. And so, slight change in schedule as the next speaker is not able to make it. So, we'll be shifting the talk schedules forward. And so, Chiv will be the next and last speaker to talk for the event. So, Chiv, if you could raise your hand, and Tuna, I may banish you to the
Oh,
audience in sorrow. But
thank
thank you.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
See you.
See you. Oh wait, can I um
Oh, hey.
if people are interested, I know it's silly, like it's a dumb thing to say, but my Twitch, is that
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that
You can
allowed?
share your Twitch. Yeah, you can link it
Um,
in the thread if you'd like as well.
what is the thread? Oh,
Oh,
okay. I'll
the
just
text channel.
thank you guys.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, that is twitch.tv/Titanic Tuna with 2 A's at the end. But yes, thank you
Thank you
again, Tuna.
guys.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
All right, Chiv, get up here for the last
Hello.
talk. Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
Hey, pretty good. Sorry to pull you earlier, so on such short
No,
notice.
it's actually all good. It actually works out really well because that means I can cast for something else right after this now. So
Oh, all right, perfect.
yeah, it's gonna be the Banger Bonanza actually qualifier release, but I'm excited for that.
Oh, that's exciting. All right, so yes, let's get you started. So for the last talk of OSU Talk event, again, all about overcoming obstacles, and Chiv will be discussing the various, I guess, natures of the OSU tournament scene and community, and some maybe problematic things that should definitely be addressed. So, Chiv, I'll leave you to your talk, and thank you everyone for being here.
Sounds good. So hey everyone. So my name is Chiv or Kevin, and just for a bit of backstory, so I've been playing tournaments for about 2.5 years now, probably 3. First year was around pretty much only regional tournaments, but then I extended my knowledge to like international, and then later on over the last year, I've also been staffing. For I guess any credibility of some sort, I do have 2 badges, but also I have been map pooling for a lot of big tournaments, including things like Corsace. I map pooled and test played for the Perennial. United States Cup 2021 and some other big names. But yeah, just to keep it too short, so today we're going to be going over what I think is the overall current state of OC tournaments and how it's, I guess, evolved over the last couple years. What I've seen personally and what I think is some things that we need to touch on because I think some of the parts of the current tournament scene are a bit unhealthy. All right, so let's begin. So first things first is that I wanted to talk about, I guess, new players and how people get into tournaments. So back then, or generally most of the time, the only way you really could have gotten into tournaments is pretty much signing up and then praying that some random extrovert captain would pick you up in LFT. This happened with me as well. My first international tournament was Hippo Cup 3. And I like to say that this actually got improved a lot because the tournament resources have actually improved dramatically over the last couple of months or years even. Some notable things include more advertisement on the OC client, the introduction of MadeBot or OC matchmaking, and also just in general, I think the overall tournament scene has grown way bigger into that pretty much every player is going to probably try playing tournaments at some period in their life. This is one thing that I was going to talk about pretty shortly because I thought it was something that I was really happy with actually. I felt that the community is more and more accepting of tournaments. Tournaments are becoming more and more popular, and also the gap or the wall between tournament players and solo players is diminishing pretty rapidly. And yeah, everyone is really getting into it, which is a good thing. That being said, though, that does lead to a lot of different problems recently that I have, I guess, noticed and what I wanted to talk about. So, first things first, the most important thing that I think we need to talk about currently for new players is that the problematic state, which revolves around basically D-rankers or I guess badge system and whatnot. So if you guys have already tried playing tournaments before, chances are you probably entered in a rank range restricted tournament somewhere around 1K to 5K, maybe lower 5-digit. But what happened was that you probably seated pretty low, and unfortunately, maybe your first match was okay, but couldn't really make it that far because the level of the players around you were way too high. And that's something that's a bit of a problem, is that new players, that when they try to get into tournaments, they're kind of being, I guess, dismissed by pretty much everyone else being significantly stronger than them, not only due to experience, but also being supposedly much lower ranked than they actually should be. And the only thing that's really been combating this, I guess, has been the badge rated system, or BWS, which pretty much means that every badge adds an artificial number of ranks to you. And once you gain, the more and more badges you get, it's at like an exponential rate. So that is what we currently have in system, right? Is that there's a BWS system, but it doesn't really work out that well. Eventually, some players are able to finally, get pushed out of the rank range because they accumulate too many badges. Obvious players being some people like X-Kirito, who's finally getting out of that 4-digit range despite being here for almost a year now. But also a lot of 5-digit players. And I think that the BW system is a bit flawed because not only does it mean that players are going to be, I guess, forced to play higher ranks because although, people have, I guess, like, how do I say this? Sorry. It's bad both ways because not only does it mean that it's going to take time to remove D-rankers and people are going to be slowly withdrawn from the system. Not very fast and doesn't really apply that fast. People can still sign up regardless of pending badges. But at the same time, players that do end up obtaining badges find themselves playing less and less tournaments because, to be frank, there's almost no tournaments in the 3-digit range at this point. Pretty much, there's only open rank, and the majority of all interesting and fun tournaments are pretty much all located in 4-digit and below. And this is a two-way street. It means that players will have to continuously face against D-rankers over and over again until they become a D-ranker themselves or they quit tournaments. Or secondly, the D-ranker makes it out and pretty much can't play with his friends anymore because he has too many badges and all the tournaments are pretty much locked out. This also goes in a further different path of problems, which there's like no 3-digit tournaments whatsoever. But the main thing is that I think that as a system, we need to probably look at BWS and see what it currently accomplishes and also what we can do to make it better. Now, there has been in talks with some tournament leads, such as Dio, where they're talking about introducing a tournament MMR system, which means that basically by either win or loss, you would gain an artificial amount of elo, just like any system like League or Apex. I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with it. But this has been something that's been in talks for a very long time and unfortunately hasn't really made any push recently. Due to the fact that it is just incredibly difficult to judge skill over just like playing a couple maps. Some people could be having bad days and they have to lose elo. It does exist in OC matchmaking, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to bring up, is that I think that BWS as a system right now definitely could use a lot of improvement. And I think that overall speaking, we could be looking at a tournament MMR system if there was more and more desire for it, and if there's more and more people helping out people like Dio, who are basically the ringleaders of the current OC tournament scene. Yeah, so furthermore to that, that leads into the next thing I wanted to discuss, which was the lack of tournaments at 3-digit range and above. So, pretty much speaking, if you are anywhere around the rank of 100 or 500, there might be like 2 or 3 tournaments maximum you can play at once. And this is very minimal in comparison to the vast majority of 4-digit and 5-digit tournaments on there. If you were to go to the community tab right now and look at tournaments, chances are there are pretty much no tournaments that there are pretty much no 3-digit tournaments in comparison to how many tournaments there are for the rest of the rank range. And this is due to the fact that a lot of these they just know, I guess, like overall interest in high hosting larger tournaments for bigger players, or larger tournaments for higher tier players, because you gain less out of being a host. There's less players, so there's going to be less people playing. Generally speaking, higher tier players are more critical of flaws in map pools and reffing. And overall, there's just not much to gain from hosting higher ranked tournaments. And especially with, to be honest, some tournament hosts finally stopping hosting. I know T1G didn't decide to host USC or 4WC this year, and it doesn't seem like 3G is being hosted as well this year, which is 3 big tournaments that most 3-digits are looking forward to. And that's really caused, I guess, a dent in their progress in tournaments. And I think that with that being said, it's something we want to discuss, that is there any possibility that, higher ranked players and higher ranked tournament players can, further get more tournaments? And is there any interest for hosts to continue hosting higher level tournament play? Currently, actually, there's a lot of open rank gameplay, which is something that a lot of 3-digits are looking to prove themselves in. But as I said, a lot of 3-digits who don't have the tournament experience are going to pretty much join an open rank tournament and get completely demolished by pretty much everyone around them. And it leads back to the same problem that, there's a significant gap in skill, a significant gap in experience between tournament players and regular players. This leads also back to the concept of creating a tournament MMR system where the 3-digit player could probably start at something pretty low, but if he were to win a lot of matches at the start, he could gain a lot of MMR or ELO and immediately rise up. And same goes for people who are overranked, and suddenly you don't have to fall back down. So we create a system where people are properly balanced at their skill. And overall, I think it's something that we could definitely look more towards. Now, that's a lot of talking about players. And I wanted to talk also a lot about staffing, which is probably a little more boring. But something important to note is that I guess there's a lot of, not really issues, but I guess more of a disconnect between players and staff recently. And this is across multiple roles. And the first one I wanted to talk about, I guess, is reffing. And if you guys have already heard before, there are some, we call them demon refs, or very strict refs in the tournament scene, who are extremely motivated not only to ref, but also very tight on timers. And this has created a huge disconnect between players and referees alike, due to the fact that refs believe that matches should be professionalized and be at a very consistent state, while players don't really expect those timers that they are set to be like that harsh. So yeah, we wanted to talk about how, I guess, the disconnect between players and referees alike is something that I think is going to become more and more of a bit of a problem as OC tournaments become more and more professional. And it's something that I also want to mention, is because that, are we making tournaments for the enjoyment of players, or are we making tournaments to push OSU as a game, right? that's the biggest problem, is that we're currently in this transition phase where OSU is getting way bigger and improving, I guess, in popularity at a much larger rate. And that creates more and more tournaments, that creates more and more tournament players. But that original charm of, every tournament having 2 warm-ups, people just picking whatever they want to pick for fun, people doing strat roulette, whatever, that's kind of all been pushed underground. Pretty much every tournament doesn't have any warm-ups anymore. Strict refs, pretty much copy-pasted pools over and over again. And it's kind of that fact where it's like all OSU tournaments are becoming more and more standardized. And I don't know if that's the position or that's the direction that we want to push ourselves in, or if it's just, the modernization of the tournament scene. As I said before, map pool is also being standardized, which is something I wanted to talk about, which is map pooler and player disconnect, which is also going to be referencing pretty much how map poolers want to make a pool that's most fun for players, but also map poolers want to be pulling stuff that they find enjoyable. And that's a big problem, because then the players want to be, there's a bit of a disconnect where players will complain about maps being not fun, maps being low quality, maps being overused, maps being too boring. And factoring in all of this, map pooling has become probably one of the hardest roles, if not the hardest role, besides hosting, obviously, in terms of tournament play. And as a map pooler myself, it's become really difficult to satisfy players. And I think that it's something I wanted to talk about, because I think we need to understand what players want as map poolers, because there's some map poolers that pretty much don't even look at the map pool feedback channel and just pool as much as they want. And on the flip side, players that don't actually understand how difficult map pooling as a process is. And this creates many rifts in the relationship, because I think overall this is probably the most underappreciated role in tournament staffing in general. I know Dio has talked about this a lot, but it's something that's important to know, is that players should be more open-minded towards how the map pooling process works, and staff should be more transparent with how the staffing process works for players. And I think that's something that I really want to strive to, I guess, focus on as kind of map pooler myself, that we should push towards, back to the way where it's like everyone enjoyed playing pools. Pools are meant to be for fun for players, and players are supposed to understand that map pooling is a fun but also a very difficult process. And I think if that bond is strengthened, then the pool quality will actually generally increase over time, and overall the understanding between player and map pooler relationship will be very strong. And yeah, besides map pooling and reffing, which are probably the 2 most important roles, there's one smaller role that I want to talk about, which is commentating. And this is largely a bit of a concern to me, because it's actually has regards to higher level tournament play, and also commentators wanting to become, or how to basically be a commentator. So it doesn't take much to commentate for a lower tournament, but especially for higher tournaments, a lot of tournaments are looking for a specific credibility, and it's very difficult to obtain a commentator spot at the highest level of tournament play, including things like OWC and Corsace. And what's a bit upsetting to me is that I feel like those higher tournaments don't really look at the achievements that somebody has done, and rather they look at I guess like preference or favoritism or nepotism to some extent. And this has been pretty adamant if you looked at OWC 2021 and 2020, where I think both Fire Rage and Dio did not get commentating spots despite being extremely active in the tournament scene. And this could lead to multiple different paths of arguments, right? Is it because Dio and Fire Rage don't have a good voice to commentate? Is it because they're too unprofessional? Is it because they need more experience? Is it because there are better commentators out there? And these are all questions we ask when it's like, what actually does it take to be a commentator, and what is the overall goal for a commentator, right? So that's something I wanted to know, is that I feel like the overall transparency of staff isn't really that large. We still don't really know why Dio or Fire didn't really get any commentating spots. Dio ended up getting his last year, I believe, though, so congrats to him. But it's really unfortunate to see that there's still this disconnect in staffing, where it's like players don't really know what's happening, and staff is kind of refusing to tell or share any information. And I think that this disconnect between players and staff is something that we really need to focus on, not only between commentating and between staff, but also between the players and map poolers and players and referees, in order to create, a much stronger tournament scene. And I think that's something that we should all strive towards. So yeah, besides, I've touched on a lot of topics today, pretty rushed, but hope you guys understand it's pretty informal. So we talked about badge rated system and how to balance tournaments properly, including I guess the BWS system and MMR. We talked about the disconnect, well not disconnect, the lack of tournaments at high tournament play for 3 digits and not including open rank really. And also we also talked about map pooling disconnects, referee disconnects, and overall how to strengthen the tournament scene as a whole. So yeah, besides that, I guess what I could also talk about is I guess communication is the last thing that I wanted to mention, and that's pretty much ties everything we've talked about today. And that I feel like there's a lot of, I guess, unprofessionalism, or the way people deal and solve problems in the community is very immature at times. And I think a lot of people probably have recognized this. If you spend any time on Twitter, if you spend any time on any popular Discord, chances are somebody is complaining about something that should be private matter to sort out, but they're drawing attention towards it, and it creates a much bigger problem than it actually should. And with this communication issue, players are pretty much unwilling to listen to other players, and people create echo chambers for themselves. People ran on Twitter all the time. I know this happened literally last week. One top player mentioned that there was a really bad map in the perennial pool, and that got a lot of traction, probably like 300 likes on the tweet, and everyone just kind of like dogpiled completely on the map without any remorse for any of the map poolers, without any remorse for any of the mappers themselves, because they made a custom of the map as well, right? It's not like people are not putting effort in. And I understand that players can be frustrated. Players can be upset about how a pool is looking or how a map quality is. But I think that whole disconnect of bringing it to the public and like kind of whining about it is a really big problem that we should address, right? This isn't something that's, I guess, positive for the community. If you pretty much just say something completely negative, I think it's just something that we really need to focus on. This also leads more into map pool feedback channels, where some people specifically have historically been very unprofessional with the way they give feedback, calling map pool is trash, calling map pools they should retire. Same with refing. People think that refs don't really have feelings, and they kind of just pretty much just say like, I remember this tweet distinctly also got like 100 likes saying like, this referee is the worst referee of all time, and we need to banish them no matter what. And it's just like, I feel like there's not that strong of an understanding between players how these roles actually are, right? If you're reffing 4 matches at once, chances are you're not going to be focusing on the individual quality of matches, and you're going to have to be strict with your timers because you're reffing so much at once. And if you're map pooling, you're not catering towards one specific player, right? You're catering towards the entire player base, and it becomes so difficult because different players want different things, and it becomes incredibly difficult to please everyone at the same time. And I think this is something that everyone should recognize, because in order for us to have a stronger relationship, not only should players be more understanding of how staffing works, and vice versa with staffing understanding what the players want, but the communication between players and, I guess, the open feedback online with platforms and the staffing transparency towards players is something that we all need to work on. And yeah, I think that if we were able to solve all these problems, this is an incredibly difficult situation to solve, because there's just so much that's going on right now, and it's incredibly difficult to even solve one of these problems, because I think it's just like there's so much going on right now, and there's so much development that more and more people that are getting into the tournament scene are bringing in their own ideas and bringing in their own concepts, and I don't expect any change to be happening anytime soon. But I think it's something that we should really strive towards, in order to not only create a more professional environment for players, but also to create a more professional environment for, I guess, the entire OSU scene as a whole. And yeah, I hope you guys kind of understood what I was talking about. I know that kind of talked about a lot of content, and I don't know, should I ask for like questions now? Oh, I don't know if Habib is here, but oh,
Hey,
hello.
yeah, I'm here. What's up?
I kind of talked about mostly what I wanted to talk about today. I don't know if I should go over anything more.
That sounds good. I think you reached a pretty solid point of stopping. You can say your your thank yous. Although you'll still be here, and we'll sort of have a post talk discussion as well.
Okay, sure. I mean, we could have that discussion right now, I guess. Or not.
Yeah.
I'm okay if anything.
Yeah, I think
Thank yous.
yeah, well, no, thank you as in,
Oh, thank you to everyone for listening, I guess, for sure. Yeah. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have a small platform to talk about what my opinions on. I hope that people kind of understood, or kind of have a better understanding of how tournaments function, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable having the perspective of someone like you who's like really involved in the community, and not just from a player's perspective, but you've really been around when it comes to staffing in all these big tournaments. Like you have some basis for the claims that you're making, and I think that's something that's really valuable when we talk about bringing up opinions like these in the first place. So yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, I think something that at least came to my mind, and I'll try not to make this become too much of a like panel type thing, but just to give my 2 cents, is when you mention a sort of lack of either tournaments in a certain rank range, and also on top of that, to some extent lack of refs. I think if we're talking about refs who take 4 matches at once, I think that is more an indicator of a lack of referees in general, because there must be some reason why, like, I think if we had more people, then obviously that would be solved quite easily. So, but regardless, I think the theme there is sort of incentive to host, or staff, and not necessarily a monetary incentive, but sort of, I think there's a lot of, or at least this is a theme that I remember feeling a lot throughout the community, is like there's a large sense of thanklessness in the tournament community, where lots of staff members would, sort of give their all. They would give their weekends, for lack of a better term, or sometimes not even. They would literally sacrifice their weekends every single weekend, for doing their part in making the tournament community what it is. And I think it burns a lot of people out, just because there is, what the heck? Just got smacked by a fly. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of that sort of feeling, or at least sort of what I've experienced. I don't have many solutions to propose, but I think that's something that's worth bringing up, since it seemed like a fairly common theme between those things.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree, actually. I did talk about it a bit, but yeah, I think that there's actually, I know a lot of hosts. I was talking to a couple of them, specifically Dio, Kali. I talked to Chilia, Saika, and there's honestly like not much to gain hosting tournaments, and especially at higher rank range, where I think more and more players like, I think actually generally speaking, the 5-digit and 4-digit scene you actually gain more out of hosting for more players. There's a lot larger of a player base to access, and I feel like people are actually more and more appreciative of hosts, and also reffing and map pooling in lower rank range tournaments. I feel like at the highest level, there are a lot of top players who I don't think set the best examples when it comes to professionalism, because they kind of instead of like being like, I guess, like very transparent, to be like, oh, this tournament sucked because this map was in the pool. Oh, this tournament sucks, this referee's bad. And because they have that top player status, people will listen to them, and therefore, creates an echo chamber where these people have a platform, I guess, on Twitter or whatnot, to talk about how these tournaments are bad, and everyone just says like, yeah, I agree. Which is something that I really don't personally like, but I think it's partially, yeah, due to the fact that people are unappreciative of roles, but also a lot of top players' mindsets aren't very positive, I guess, in the tournament scene.
Yeah, and I'll also add, since I did mention incentives, I think it's a tricky line to cross, or discuss, just because of the sort of overarching culture of OSU, where the contributions to the game are supposed to be from your own heart and soul, and not from any incentive, regardless of if it's monetary. Which again, just as a to clarify once again, that when I say incentives, I'm not talking about monetary incentives. But even things like greater recognition for those who give their time to making the community what it is, and the tournament community specifically. But yeah, I think between all the points that you brought up, I think it really shows the the commitment that the tournament community has towards all these topics, because it's not just like a group of people who just think it's fun to like talk about this stuff, or like they just play OSU tournaments for fun or host them for fun. I think it's really a group of people that care a lot about making the community as best as they can. And I think when people address their concerns within the tournament community, it comes from a place of wanting the best for the scene and the community as a whole. So, and
Right.
I think you've mentioned that you've talked to a lot of people about this stuff as well, which also sort of indicates that like a lot of people have opinions about this stuff. And I think it would be of service to everyone if those opinions could be a bit more public, for lack of a better term.
Right.
I think at some point there will definitely be a talk event themed around tournaments, and I think hopefully that can serve as a place and platform for players and refs and hosts and map players and everything alike to give their perspective, and even some people who are somewhat distant from the tournament scene, but maybe they're only spectators, because as you know, especially in trying to develop a scene, a lot of it, like, development is mostly measured through viewership. And so obviously you can have a higher player base in your tournament, but really, especially when it comes to commentating and streaming, viewership is really, really important. So I think it would be really nice to have the viewers be a part of that discussion as well. That was a main concern, especially in the failed scores era, which, for the sake of everyone listening, I won't get too into. Also for my own sake, but yeah, a large argument towards allowing failed scores to count as 0 points was that mostly for the viewership hype factor, or however it's described. But yeah, I think my point is that I think it'll definitely value the community if we have a platform where the viewers are also able to give their opinion, especially in a culture where generally the end receiver of an effort, whether it be software or a OSU tournament, where the hosts are trying to consider the players, but it's very rare that they take in opinions from the mere spectators who couldn't have a clue as to how things really are, blah, 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 right? But yeah, I don't know. I think that's definitely something that we should all look forward to, is that sort of event, which coming soon at some point, talk event themed around tournaments. And as well, I should mention on that topic that the next talk event will be themed around mapping and modding. So anyone who would be interested in that, stay tuned, and we'll try to theme it somewhat around all modes if possible, although there will also be specific talk events around specific modes. So if those of you who are mostly in non-standard game modes and you'd be interested in giving your 2 cents, or what's a more extreme version of 2 cents, but anyway,
I don't know,
your strong perspective on your own modes. Yes, your 3 cents on on your mode's culture, especially when it comes to mapping and modding or anything else. There will be themed OSU Talk events around each game mode, and hopefully sub things around that mode as well. But yes, regardless, those are sort of my thoughts on what is happening. So yeah.
No
Chiv,
worries. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, any last thoughts, Chiv?
Yeah, I think that overall the goal is that we can create, a platform where people are having fun, both staff and players, and that's the main goal for OSU tournaments that I want to aim for. I'm going to continue putting as much effort as I can, so we'll see what I can do. I plan on also hosting a tournament this year, so not too sure how that's going to turn out, but yeah, if you guys ever want to talk about any tournament stuff, or I'm always open on Discord, and you can just message me and we can always talk about it, because I'm always willing to listen and improve my opinion as well. I think it's really good if everyone is really open-minded towards this, and we can all benefit from it. That being said, I have to go cast like Banger Bonanza like right now.
Oh yeah, don't mean to keep you here for so long, but yeah, good luck with that, and I'm sure people can reach you through OSU DMs as well, I assume.
Yep. Sounds good. Of course, yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much. Take care, everyone.
All right,
Bye.
good luck. See ya. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I think that was a very successful series of talks, not only today, but throughout the weekend. So I appreciate everyone for joining. And once again, stay tuned for all of the various future events that we will be hosting. So, yes, clap, clap, clap. Thank you, everyone, for your interest. And if you want to support the event, definitely share the news about this event to anyone who you think might appreciate it. And more importantly, actually, if you know anyone who would be interested in giving a talk in the future, then there is a speaker nomination form which you guys can find on the news post that was for this talk. And also maybe someone can link it in the text thread, but that nomination form will be universal. So regardless of the theme of the talk, there will not be a there will not be a new nomination form, so you won't have to worry about that. If you're interested in giving a talk for your specific mode or some other future talk event that maybe has not been had a theme announced for it, then yes, you are welcome to still use the nomination form, and we will reach out to you when the time comes. But thank you, everyone, again for a successful first OC Talk event, and we will see you all next time.